Okay.
It's well, I left it in the chat. I don't know if Ben, can you see that?
No, let me see.
Well, I can
See
just
if,
read it.
yeah, if you can do that, it might be easier.
So you spoke some about kind of different levels of vision, and back when I never really seemed to have much inner vision. Others do, and it seems like oddly used to speak about that some, that it didn't really seem to be. Well, I don't know. My memory may be faulty. Didn't always seem like that was critical, but he always spoke about his vision, and you speak about yours, and other senior students always seem to speak about it. So I don't know. Can you just sort of address that a little bit?
Yeah, it some people are cursed with vision, and other people are are blessed and have no vision or have clear sight, and and often the reason in some of the traditions they even recommend that you not talk about them, and some teachers will say it's pointless to talk about the visions. It just keeps people more involved in the world. But it also it at the same time, if you don't talk about them, they don't have an awareness of what's possible and what's capable in the other way. And it's just like some of the things that happen to me. There's some of them that are karmic, some of them that are development from other levels that allowed me or caused me to have more sight in some places and in some cases. And Audley had a similar experience. He had many of the same kinds of experiences that I did, and that's why I was fortunate to find him, and he was able to help me. But he would also, as most teachers will say, if you're seeing things, you're not there. You're not in the self. You're not in the oneness. And everybody says, yeah, but I'd like to see just a little bit so I can know it's real. I want it to be more than faith. And like a lot of even the text, like Dr. Thin's text, Radiant Road to Reality, the science of enlightenment, or the science, the scientific method to move beyond and to know that. And so people have a need, or beings have a need to have some awareness in those levels, but too much of it can take you to a really strange state. It can cause you to get lost completely. And I think the real challenge when people begin to meditate and begin to develop inner awareness is they often become overwhelmed by it, or excited by it, to the point that that's all they want to do. And Audley had a few students that like the one student that I referenced that was dying. He got to the point where that's all he wanted to do. He was meditating anywhere from 8 to 12 hours a day, and instead of working. And that was part of the reason why I ended up having challenges, since he didn't have income. He was doing things that weren't right use of energy with other students. But he became so, he thought that was where it all was happening. That's where you would find enlightenment. And if you had lots of experiences, then it's good. And my experience is, no, it's just the opposite. You're better off if you don't see anything clearly. If you don't hear anything, it's harder to do some of the exercises for the subtle sounds. But I found that when I talk to people one on one, if I start asking questions, usually they end up telling me what they're seeing and what they're hearing. And at the same time, they're telling me, I don't see anything and I don't hear anything. And I'll say, well, you just shared this dream with me that you had this experience and it was very real. And you thought that was a flying saucer, for example, in a person I was talking to just a couple of days ago. And they said, yeah, every time I go to sleep, I see these different things or these different levels of awareness. That they're clearly transitioning in the dream state. And it's the subtle realm. And so we all experience that all the time. And some of us have a story that says, oh, I see it all. And then some of us have a story that I don't see anything. And the sight or the awareness opens in different ways. But the really challenging part is that each one of the chakras or the centers is an eye or a sense organ, in a sense. And you can experience the causal realm, the subtle realm, and the the gross realm through that. And like if you experience the gross realm, you'll feel on your body where the chakras are associated or correlated. In the subtle stuff, you can see all kinds of things and stuff. And most of it just ends up being garbage. And one thing I found is that one teacher in particular, Shinzen Young, who teaches mindfulness meditation, has an excellent book, Science of Enlightenment. He talks about a period that he went through for a few months when he was doing his practices where he began to see things. And he said for him, seeing things meant these 6-foot grasshoppers on the University of Michigan campus. He would see all these large insects when he was going to class. And he had enough training that when that opened up in the sight, he said, I wasn't frightened of them. I wasn't annoyed. I wasn't anything. They were just there, but they were everywhere I went for a while. These things were all on the grass and all around me. And he said, that was my experience of the subtle realm. He said, does it help me to come to a greater level of awareness or enlightenment? No. He said, but the biggest thing is that you don't want to get caught in it. He said, like some people see things like that and they become very fearful. And I saw some of the students that Audley had that opened up in a way and they were terrified by what they saw. And so he would tend to shut them down. I mean, he would work on the centers and adjust them in a way that it would not overwhelm them. And then they could come to it easily. There were a few students that saw things like that simply, it frightened them so much they went away and they never came back. And so there's not, it just seeing is not where it's at. Understanding the levels and the planes of consciousness, that's what's most important. And if you can transition between those, and like what Shinzen Young said, he said it's often if you can see things and you go out and you interact, and like Audley described it as he would say, if you can see them, they can see you. And if you see beings in other levels, they begin to interact. And if they can see that your light is focused, your attention is focused on them, they can feel it, and then they begin to focus on you, and you may feel it in your body. And there are beings out there that just like to, take advantage of others. There's that in the physical world, in the gross world. There's a lot of people like that. They want to try to scam people, take advantage of them, trick them, and do that. It's that way in the subtle realms, but it's often much easier to be deluded in those levels because you think, oh, I've got the sight, I've got clear sight. I always came to the point that any good magician can make white light. Any dark wizard, any dark lord, if he's worth his salt at all, he can make really bright lights and do that. And so you can be deceived very easily by thinking you know what's going on. And Shinzen Young said it's often like we're on driving and we plan to go from LA to San Francisco, and that's a north-south drive. You leave LA and you drive on I-5 and you head north, and but you get up there and you see these giant grasshoppers, in the fields out there in the Central Valley, and you think, wow, this is cool. And you turn off and you start going. And then before long, you realize you're in Denver and you're still chasing the grasshoppers. And so rather than traveling vertically and moving up through your awareness, you've begun to go out. You begin to travel horizontally. And so you're going out in the world. And that's typically what happens with people. When they see things, they're attracted to it. And like you might see beautiful women or handsome men, or, you see whatever holds in your attention, you'll begin to follow it. And then you just keep following along, and you forget about, oh, I was trying to find the divine self, just like I was just looking for God, and here I ended up in Denver again, with a bunch of grasshoppers, so I want to come back and I want to go into myself. And that's where running the Kriyas or running the energy and doing that. But it can take you, deeper into yourself. But the being able to see things and to share, it's useful, it's fun, when I look at it, and as I share stories from the subtle level, the subtle experiences I've had, it triggers a part of that component within you. Either you say, oh, it's just total bullshit, or you say, wow, that rings true. I know what that's like, an experience I've had. And so that's what we're trying to do in the whole teaching or series of classes is to help you become aware of that inner component of yourself and to remember what you are, to remember the true self. And then if you can transition and move deeper into that, that's even better. And then you start having that awareness, and when you have enough subtle realm experience, or physical world experience, you think, oh, there's got to be something more to this. And then you begin to become aware that you're the one watching or observing all of these things that are happening at all the various levels. And then you can become free from it, and you can act and move among it. You can become the freeman of the whole estate, as Audley said. Does that help any at all?
Yeah, it's complicated.
It is.
Well, Ben, I have maybe a related question.
Yeah.
That is, I'm trying to understand the difference between the subtle realm and the subconscious.
Yeah.
Am I talking apples and oranges?
No. It's a different way to, there's parts of ourselves, and I mean, that's the talk about it being complicated. There's a part of ourself that, in a sense, like each chakra or each center, can express in the gross, subtle, and the causal levels. And the subconscious, there's a portion of that we're simply not aware of in a lot of it. And so, but it can be at any one of the chakras or any one of the centers that you're experiencing that. And the subconscious is simply something that's not present in your awareness. And in a sense, you could say, well, everything, and if I'm not seeing anything, everything in the subtle is in my subconscious. Yes and no. There are parts of it that, when you go into a dream, and that was some of the work that Freud and Jung both did. They would look at dream experiences, the subtle experiences, and they would say, oh, that means this, this, and this, and it's subconscious in the sense that you may have had something happen to you at some point in your life, maybe when you were a child. That's where Freud always went back to, said everything started in your childhood. And because, you were abused or you were treated in this particular way. And when we're abused, if it's more than we can handle, a lot of times we put a lid on it. We simply don't look at it. And this is real common. And in therapy, that's what we always try to do, is address the subconscious, or the parts that I'm not aware of in my life. And sometimes simply becoming aware of those, or knowing those subconscious parts, you simply, as you even talk about it to a therapist, or you talk about it to a friend, or whatever, you simply disassociate with it, and you make it an object out in the world, rather than it being you. It becomes an object outside of you. And that's that one therapy, what they try to do in that is simply get everything outside of you. And when there's, and in a sense, go into the causal level, it would be one way to say it, so that there's nothing that's hidden from your consciousness. But we all have, our karmic load is kind of wrapped up in maybe the parts that we're not aware of. You could say subconscious in a sense, but it expresses in all the levels. And I don't know if that helps or makes it worse.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring up a question, because I have to leave in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. You were talking about the mala beads.
Yeah.
You said you should use the right hand. Why?
Oh, there's I've got 3 or 4 books, that I've read. All of them recommended as like Audley talked about, the receptive, positive, and the negative aspects of our energy field. And I've seen that with most people, that's pretty consistent. The right hand is positive, but there are people that have polarity reversals in that. But we use the right hand because it's the more positive expression, and we want to know God. That's what, some of the text.
And so if you're left-handed,
it
would
may
the opposite be?
It could be, and in that you would, I would just say you try it both ways, and see what's more natural and what brings greater calm. And I haven't done it much. I've done a little bit with the left hand, just to explore that sort of thing that you asked. Like if somebody says always use the right hand, I think, okay, I'll use the left hand. you know, and just to be, I want to know why, just like you did. And it
Well,
may
I'm
be the
left-handed,
polarity,
so
yeah, the polarity of the body, you know, may do that. And the left-handedness has, and right-handedness has some to do with how the brain is wired or structured, you know, and we can test this with the EEG and all sorts of things where the active regions in the brain are. And clearly people that, you know, that are left-handed, they have a few things. Like one of the things I've read is that left-handed people don't read maps very well. They don't
I would
conceptualize
disagree with that.
yeah, it may be, but you know, these are all generalizations. But some, you know, some people that have different aspects, and then some, like my oldest sister, she was naturally left-handed, reached for left hand with everything. There was a belief in a mythology in my family that if you're left-handed, it's evil. It's the
Well,
dark
yeah, I
side,
am. I'm
you know,
very
and so
evil.
they even tied her hand behind her back so she learned to write with her right hand, you know, a distorted, you know, talk about put stuff in the subconscious. Steve, you can do things like that to children that will put things in that they may have great anger about, but they don't know why. And so, you know, as you do therapy, you try to uncover some of those, but a lot of the things energetically, like the question handedness and things like that, those are best you test them and see.
Okay.
And the same with like I read that you know, this finger, the ring finger, triggers imagery more, triggers awareness in those levels. I found, yeah, it does. You know, I can turn it up or turn it down, you know, and it's like too much is too much. You know, you don't want it. It's like you can't shut it off. And then when you turn it down or turn it off, you know, then you can focus and you can see what you want, focus in the realms and the levels that you want to experience. That help?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Good question.
Thank you.
And Stephen, were you satisfied with the subconscious, or do you want to deal with that more?
It may be one of those things I need to let soak in, because at this point, it's real muddy.
Yeah, that's understandable. Some of these are, you know, the explanations are, I would call them overlapping explanations in a sense. And it's just like the physical, you know, the gross world, like a lot of people see only the gross world or the physical world, and they think that's all it is. And, you know, all of us tend to think, you know, my body, you know, we have that awareness, but then you can, have components of your consciousness that for whatever reason you've repressed or you've blocked out. And in a sense, we do that with a lot of things, but more trauma in life, I've seen people tend to block that. And that's when, you know, if too much of it's blocked, like if there's too much anger or fear underlying all of the things that you're expressing and you're doing in life, a lot of times people aren't able, they just end up depressed. They're not able to produce and to be active in the world. And so that's when, you know, we say, oh, well, they need some help. They need some therapy. And it was interesting. Like several people have even asked me different points, like, why do I talk about therapists and stuff like that? Well, when I got to a certain point with some issues with my father passing away in 1985, you know, I went to Audley and I talked about it at length, and he worked with me and meditated. And he says, I think you should go see a therapist. And I thought, you know, in Oklahoma, you know, if you go see a therapist, that means you're crazy. You know, you just don't do shit like that. You know, the whole world would know. And he said, no. He said, and I told him, I just said, you know, this was my experience and feeling at the time. And he says, no, he said, you should go see this guy. And he gives me a card, like this was premeditated. You know, he had found somebody who knew about how to deal with issues with the father when the father's departed. You know, and so I went to see the guy, and it helped me a great deal. And then after that, a few months later, after I'd gone through the therapy and kind of resolved some of that, I told him I was really having a lot of these physical things that I couldn't deal with. And he said, oh, you need to get Rolfing. And he had a card for a guy that was a Rolfer. and you know, actually helped my energy a great deal, helped me to balance some things. But you know, my relationship with Audley is I saw a whole lot of other components that other people simply didn't, I guess, have the experience. And I always, my take was I had a lot more problems than most people. So he was, you know, he was trying to do everything he could to help me, you know, and some of the things like, you know, meditation alone, maybe with enough time and enough isolation, but when we're trying to do it fast track, working in the world, raising a family, doing all these things, and then trying to meditate and know God too, you know, there's a lot going on. And then if you have brought in a heavy karmic load, and it's like Audley, my sense was is Audley had not been in the world for a while. And so some of us that had really gotten our karma messed up, you know, and had past relationships with him, we came and we were kind of at the end, you know, we desperately needed some help. So we showed up, and I needed a lot of help. So I was fortunate to get a lot of help in that sense. But there are components to ourself that we're not aware of. They can be described in terms of conscious, subconscious, but and that gives us two levels of to differentiate, where like the 3 levels, you know, we get gross, subtle, and physical, or causal, gross, subtle, causal world, and then really the, you know, as I've talked about before, we have the 4th level, the turiya, the conscious awareness. And then when the 5th level that you move into, if you want to go to 5 levels, you go into the source, you know, you become one with the source. And when that happens, you're no longer aware of all of these, you know, gross, subtle, and physical stuff. It's just you blend with that and you become one with it. And then but that's transformative experience. It's kind of like doing a mantra long enough. It changes your consciousness. It changes your brain. It changes your awareness. You simply see and experience a different world.
Good, thank you. What else comes up to mind is ancestral issues that come with the
Yes.
body.
Right.
You know, I would have thought those were something like the subconscious.
Yep. And you could describe them in that way. And there are components, you know, in when you look at the oversoul, and we tend to, you know, we're actually, all people are manifesting at once. I mean, all spirits and that, but the ancestral thing, the lifetimes that we've lived and the karmic patterns that we built up, they all, a part of that is carried forward in time. And in the Tibetan traditions, it's defined as the drop or the essence of what you are as a being, and that they define it actually as a small drop of energy, and that energy is consolidated, and it's you know, and it's slightly different for the male and the female. And they're different association. Like if at the gross level, it's the drop is white in color for the male and red in color for the female. And in the gross level, that's a representation of the semen in the male and the menstrual blood in the female. You know, and it's components of it. But what we carry from lifetime to lifetime is not the specific memories of who you are in this life, and you know, it was Audley or it was Ben or whatever. What's carried forward is the attainment or the awareness, the capability that you've developed, and that is encoded in that small drop. And that's why we carry that forward, you know, throughout time. And that actually resides in the heart or in the center of the being. And you know, but there's a lot of traditions and stories, and some of those are useful, some aren't. But it's simply yes, a component of the ancestral awareness, the ancestral knowledge, the cultural awareness. You know, we all grow up in a physical culture, and we're influenced by that shapes the mind. I've found that things, even when I've looked at that in detail, even the geography of where you're born has an effect on the consciousness that you have. And I found that when like if there's a heavy concentration of a lot of rock, like granite, like you go to New England and there's a granite underlying much of that plateau or that platform there, and it affects even the language patterns. People speak differently, and you go to different places in the world, and language that's used to describe it is expressed in different ways, and linguistically it shapes the mind. And so all of these things happen, but the cultural component, the linguistic component, the knowing that we have, it can be quite complex, but you can sort through it. And if you like to really dig into that sort of awareness and looking at it, I recommend Ken Wilber's work, most in that. I mean, he's too much for most people, but if you can sort through and understand his teaching and his awareness, he helps put a lot of these things into perspective better than anybody I've seen.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? I think we've gone a couple hours, so it's
Oh,
Thanks, Ben.
okay. Well,
Thank
thank you. And any of you interested, I'll be back in a couple of weeks with more on mantra.
all right.
And-
Thanks.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.